La 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 la, wait till I get my money right.
Welcome everyone to 360 Sports Network. We are going to be talking BCS football. I'm Alex Delaverson. Dawson, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Alex. First BCS rankings are out. It's time to dissect what the computers and the humans have done right and wrong here.
Well, looking at the BCS rankings, of course, there's two SEC teams at the top. Big surprise there. So what do you got to say about these rankings? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Any teams you're rooting for, rooting against? What do you got for us?
Well, the top 8 all make sense. We got the 8 big undefeated teams: LSU, Alabama, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Boise State, Oklahoma State, Stanford, and Clemson. You got pretty much all the major conferences, all the BCS conferences minus the Big East are represented, and you got Boise State, the non-BCS conference, involved in there. So I'm fine with the teams who are up there. What I'm not as fond of, and I'm never really fond of it, is how it's broken down. The top 2 teams are both from the SEC, like you stated, and that's because everybody perceives the SEC to be the powerhouse every year. And you know what? Most of the time, yes, they are. They are the best conference. But because we assume them to be the best conference, that means that automatically the LSUs and the Alabamas are number 1 and number 2. When you look at the computer rankings and how the computers have broken down unbiasedly, they actually have Oklahoma State as the top team in the country, where they are currently number 4 in the BCS, number 6 in the human polls of the USA Today and the Harris poll.
Yeah, I mean, when is the SEC team never at the top? I mean, you can't blame them for being good and getting the best recruits. I mean, who doesn't want to play in warm weather? You know, big college football programs, great tradition, great history. But, you know, I think this kind of turns people off from the sport in a way. You're seeing the same teams, like the SEC teams, generally up there every year. So I'm rooting for the schools that usually aren't at the top. I'm rooting for the Oklahoma States. I'm rooting for Boise State. Even Kansas State, which I know is a long shot. I'd like to see a championship game without an SEC team. I want to see 2 smaller schools. Not even smaller schools, just schools that usually, like I said, usually aren't there. Now, the thing is, Boise State, is always at the top. And, you know, usually they go undefeated or only lose 1 game. What does a team like a Boise State have to do, or an Oklahoma State, to actually get at the top? I mean, are they actually just waiting to see if LSU or Alabama loses, or could they actually get in if they run the table?
Sadly, I think it might take more than 1 loss to knock out both LSU and Alabama. We've seen it too many times before. We've seen 1 loss or even undefeated teams not make it to the title game in favor of a 1-loss or 2-loss SEC school because, again, they're supposedly just so much stronger and so much better. And you know what? I mean, LSU a couple years ago when they won the national championship as a 2-loss school, I was so against them making it to the title game, but they ended up winning it. And you know what? I still didn't agree with it because I don't feel like a team with 2 losses should be crowned as a national champion. Now, that being said, I mean, Boise State, their issue is that they're not going to be able to get the big games. I mean, right now they're number 6 in the computer rankings. That means their strength of schedule actually isn't bad right now, but it's going to keep plummeting as the year goes on because they have to keep playing their conference teams. Same with, like, Wisconsin. They're currently 4th in the human polls, but they're currently 11th overall in the computer rankings because they haven't played anybody yet. But those rankings will go up when they start playing teams down the stretch that are of higher quality, including like their season finale against Penn State is going to be a big increase to them, which is kind of sad to say. Penn State having not a great year, yet they're 6-1 and actually ranked in the top 20 in the BCS, actually number 16 in the computer rankings. So this is where it gets tricky because you have computers who are trying to be unbiased, accounting for 1/3 of this BCS ranking. But then you have Harris poll and USA Today poll, which are both human polls that account for the other 2/3. And when the humans are already biased enough towards, in my mind they are, biased towards the SEC because that's all you hear on ESPN, all you read online is how the SEC is so good, therefore all the voters will go and swing that way. Therefore, that's why you see LSU and Alabama in the tops in those 2 polls, where you have the computer rankings having them 2nd and 3rd in average, behind, again, Oklahoma State.
National championship game, what's going to happen? Who's going to make it?
Well, LSU and Alabama, they can't both make it. Or if they do, we're going to definitely be moving to a playoff system, I think. I will surmise that one of these two teams will finish undefeated. My guess of the two would be Alabama. LSU's having a little bit of issues. A couple players suspended for this week's game versus Auburn. This could be a very tricky game for them. So I see them having trouble. But I can honestly see an Alabama going undefeated, Oklahoma going undefeated. I can still see Stanford going undefeated, Boise obviously going undefeated, and even possibly Wisconsin running the table in the Big Ten. We could legitimately right now have 5 teams go undefeated in the country. 5 teams from 4 BCS conferences and 1 at-large conference. That right there is going to at least leave Boise State out. Beyond that, you're going to have mayhem. You're going to have so many schools and so many conferences saying, why aren't we getting our shot here? This doesn't make any sense. And you know what? I'm actually pushing for all these teams to finish undefeated so we have BCS chaos so we can finally get rid of the BCS, which stands for not Bowl Championship Series. I'll let you guys fill in the blank on that one.
In 2006, Ohio State played the Gators for the national title. If I'm correct, and I'm pretty sure I am, that's the year Ohio State lost to Michigan by only 3. And there was even talks of Michigan and Ohio State playing again for the national title. A lot of people say they deserved it, only losing 3 points to the number 1 ranked team. Would it surprise you if that does happen for LSU and Alabama, only because they are 2 SEC schools, and let's say there's a championship game or whatever happens, and it's only a small point, like 2 or 3 point game, or I'm not sure how the SEC playoffs work. Could you see something like that happening again? And if it does, what are we going to expect?
Well, yeah. The only good thing out of that is that they will play before the championship game because they are in the same division. They are both in the SEC West. So we're guaranteed not to have them both undefeated going into a championship game. That's the bright side, if there really is a bright side in all this. The downside, though, is that still you can end up with LSU or Alabama, say whoever wins their game, and they could legitimately lose in the title game to, say, South Carolina coming out of the East. Then you got those 2 SEC teams getting in there, and you're leaving the other team, the loser of LSU and Alabama, leaving them out in the dust. So that's where I think the BCS bothers me most, is that no matter what happens, you can have legitimately, you can make a legitimate argument that LSU and Alabama are the top 2 teams in the country. You can also then show the argument how if everything happens like I just explained it, one team has to lose and then the winner loses in the SEC title game. You can have one of the top 2 teams in the country not in a BCS game. And that's what kills me right now. So, I mean, back when you look in 2006 where Ohio State and Michigan played a great 1-2 matchup in the last game of the year, and that's why everybody said there should be a rematch for the title game. And, I mean, you had to choose between a 1-loss Michigan team and a 1-loss Florida team. And everybody thought it was going to be over. There was no way Ohio State would lose. And this is when the SEC came to be known as the power because Florida came and destroyed Ohio State 41-14. So there's so many little variables like this and so many what-if statements that luckily we haven't had to deal with the what-ifs too much. And I think right now, the way the season is going, there are too many strong teams that are just dominating their conference that I feel like these what-if statements are going to become a reality here. I'm not a fan of a conference champion, of 2 conferences, of 2 teams from the same conference, being in a national title game. That's what you have conference championships for. If you're going to put LSU versus Alabama in the title game, same way as if you would put Michigan versus Ohio State 5 years ago, you're saying that hands down, that's the best conference, that's who the champion's going to be. That's not how this is supposed to be. We're supposed to crown a national champion. So let's do it. Let's get everybody to play everybody so we can be able to do it right.
No, and I completely agree with you. I mean, even though Alabama and LSU are in the same division, won't play in the championship game, like what I was trying to get at, if they still find a way to get in the national championship game, especially with one not even being an SEC championship, I'll stop following college football. I mean, that would just be ridiculous. And, of course, odds of that are, pretty slim. But if that does happen, you think that would be enough to get a playoff system going. But
no, I thought it was enough when a 2-loss team was crowned a national champion. I thought that was a travesty when there were much better 1-loss teams, and even I believe there was an undefeated team that year who didn't get a shot at the title game. Instead, you put in a 2-loss team. That right there should have been crying foul. And now you're looking at a very legit scenario, like you said, of a team not even making their conference title game and possibly playing in the national championship game. It makes no sense to me.
Well, I think Kirk Herbstreit said it best. The BCS isn't fair, but honestly, it's exciting. But honestly, I would like to know the rightful champion, even if it comes to the cost of less exciting football. But then again, playoff football, no matter what, is still exciting. But either way, the mess of the BCS is something that's going to keep us talking. It's something that probably won't go away for a long, long time. Also, with that being said, we're going to wrap this show up. Dotson, anything else you want to say before we close up here? Any notes, anything we should watch out for?
I'm actually going to stick with my original prediction. I'm going to say for my national title game that we're still going to end up down the stretch with Oklahoma versus Stanford. I think they've been the most consistent all year. I think the SEC might end up imploding on itself when they play each other. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that we have a no SEC in the BCS Championship game. Oklahoma, Stanford, Big 12 versus Pac-12. And hopefully it plays out that way because I like you said, I'd like to see somebody else different.
Well, there it is. Oklahoma, Stanford. You heard it here at 3SN. So when it actually happens, make sure to give us props. But all right, everyone, have a great night and adios.